Hey there, it's Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint these decorative hanging pots. So we're going to do techniques for painting different kinds of houseplants, and I'm going to go ahead and go over the brushes and colors that I used for this tutorial. These are all listed in the description as well. I used a 3/4 inch flat wash brush, 12 bright brush, which is like a 1/2 inch flat brush, a number 4 round brush, so only 3 brushes for this tutorial. I did use a lot of colors in this painting, which is not surprising because I like to use all the colors and I have to hold back sometimes. I used Mars Black, Titanium White, Brilliant Yellow Green, Hooker's Green Hue Permanent, Raw Umber, and then there's a lot of jewel tones in the pots. So Phthalo Blue, Quinacridone Magenta, bright aqua green, and there's some raw sienna as well. So you are welcome to change the colors and patterns in this if you want. And I did this on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the first step in this painting is doing the lovely gray background. It's kind of a medium gray color. I debated for a long time what I was going to do with the background. I designed all the plants first, but I could not figure out the background. So I settled on this gray because it was simple and the plants are a little bit complicated. If you want to change the background, you are welcome to. If you want to do a different color, a solid color. I even thought about doing some kind of window in the background, but that was a little bit complex. So we're just going to go with a simple gray background. The gray is a little bit lighter in the middle and kind of darker on the outside to get more interest and focus kind of towards the center of the painting. So I have Mars Black and Titanium White on my palette, and I'm using the 3/4 inch flat brush. And so I'm just going to do, starting out with a little bit more white than black to make the center a little bit lighter. And I'm just kind of doing angled, kind of long strokes, but kind of blending in my paintbrush strokes. They're not super visible, but in the end, you're still going to see strokes. It's a very abstract background. You're just kind of blending the colors together. Just be careful not to add too much black at first. The Mars Black is a super strong color. It'll take over very fast. So when you're loading your brush, you want to only load little tiny bits of black on the tip of your brush, not a lot of black. When you get to the outer parts, like the corners, you can add a little bit more black there. That's going to allow your colors to blend so that they're a little bit darker. And then you'll definitely need more titanium white on your palette, and just go back with your white and use the white to just kind of blend. So it doesn't have to be a perfect blend, but it does kind of go from light to dark, going from the inside of the painting to the outer parts of it. So just very smooth cross-hatching strokes going all different directions. If your paint is drying fast, you can add little bits of water to your brush, not too much, because the water will soak down and get into the underlayer of the paint. It'll not be fun if you do too much water at this point. So little bits of water to help the paint to spread. At this point, I want to go in and add just a little bit extra white in the center and kind of smooth out my strokes. It's going to be really hard to really smooth out all these strokes. So if you see a lot of paint strokes on your background, it's okay. The background's not really the focus of the painting. The plants are, so they're really going to be disguising all those brush strokes. But just a little pop of white just in the center and just kind of lightly going over some of these strokes. But again, it's okay if they're still visible. So we are going to go ahead and let this dry, and then we'll be using a piece of chalk to draw all of our pots next. This is just a regular piece of chalk, and it's good for drawing very basic shapes. We're not drawing any intricate fine details, so the chalk works for this example. I'm going to start in the kind of upper middle area, not exactly the center, but a little bit above center. I'm just going to draw kind of a circular shape, like half of a sphere, maybe like a quarter of a sphere. The little oval for the top and then the curve for the bottom. And then I just did the little knot and little rope fraying pieces kind of hanging down. And then our rope piece goes up to hug the bottom of the pot area. And then we have let's do 4 angled lines. So these 2 lines connect to the sides of it. These ones kind of connect in the back. So they all kind of gather together in the center. And then we have our vertical line. So for the vertical line part, this is my broken T-square ruler. I need to get a new one. But just lining it up to the edge of the canvas will help you get that line to be nice and vertical, especially for this drawing portion, so that our plants aren't kind of swaying unless you want them to be that way. We're not going to draw the Pathos plants or any of the plants because that's going to be a lot of drawing, a lot of tedious drawing for this large piece of chalk. So just the pots, that's what we're drawing. So I'm going to do a very similar type of pot down here. This is the very center of the painting, but it's lower. So the bottom third area of our canvas. And so this one's going to be more of a trapezoid shape versus rounded. It's a little bit more flat on the bottom and angled on the sides. Still kind of an oval at the top, angled lines, and then the bottom is slightly curved. So I'm going to use my T-square to find the center of this so I can do my vertical rope line, and then I can decide how this is going to be hanging. So we have, this one's going to have 3 lines. So these ones are just going to kind of swoop down and curve and connect to each side. And then a third one kind of in the back. And then you can definitely change the designs of these pots. You can get more elaborate with the macrame style of the ropes that going different directions or making different patterns. I'm just simplifying it, but definitely if you want to make this more complex or unique, you are welcome to do that. There's a lot of creativity that can happen with this painting. So this one up here is going to be a rounded pot, a little bit smaller than the other 2. So pretty much drawing a circle right now, but the very, very top slither part of the circle is flat, where the opening of that pot will be. And then 2 diagonal chord lines. I'm just doing 2. And then get my vertical line in there to the center. And then we can do our knot and little fraying pieces going down. And the lower left is going to be a little wood piece, little wood board with a cylindrical pot. There's going to be a little cactus in that pot. So we need to draw a little piece of wood. So a horizontal line and then a diagonal line, and then repeat that to make those set of lines parallel, and 2 vertical lines. And then this line right here is horizontal. So this little piece of board is going off the side of the canvas. We don't see the full size of it. And then we're going to draw a cylindrical pot on top. So this one, because the board's going off the side, we can just kind of estimate where it is central. So a little curved line at the bottom, I'll move my hand away, I promise. And then 2 vertical lines. So we're just drawing a very basic cylinder, and then the opening is like an oval on top. So that got a little bit lopsided. So the 2 sides should be vertical, top should be a small oval. And then we can draw the vertical line. Because this one is hanging off the side of the canvas, it does not have to be exactly center, but we can just kind of guess. So I did the vertical cord piece and then 3 diagonal pieces that are attached to each corner of our wooden board. Make sure these lines are exactly vertical. Next, we're going to go ahead and paint each of the pots. So I'm going to start with the pot in the upper right, and that one is going to be Phthalo Blue as the main color, and I will use titanium white and Mars black to highlight and shadow it. I'm using a number 4 round brush and basically just outlining the shape of that pot and filling it in solid with strokes that kind of curve and go in the direction of that shape. So this is a really pretty deep blue color. You're welcome to change the colors of these pots and add different kinds of patterns if you want. So the middle part, I'm filling it in with these curved strokes, and that's going to give that pot kind of the look that it's 3-dimensional just by making those strokes going in that curved direction. And then without rinsing the brush, added a little bit of Mars black. I'm going to water it down just slightly, but using that Mars black and Phthalo Blue, about equal parts of the blue to black. I'm going to fill in the top area with that darker color because it would be darker and more shadowy in that area. A lot of this is going to be covered with all the little Pathos plants leaves. There's a lot of leaves on this plant, so just keep in mind if you want to make this pot super detailed, a lot of that detail work may not show up because a lot of the leaves are going to be covering most of the pot. For the highlight, so I rinsed my brush off, got all the black off the brush, and on my palette, mixed about equal parts white and blue together. It's going to make a light blue, and that white really makes that blue very, very bright and vivid. But using that lighter blue color, I just kind of stroked in the curved direction just on the left side of that pot. And let's add just a little bit more white to this. So without rinsing the brush, added a teeny tiny bit of white right there at the tip of my brush. And I'm just going to kind of do the same thing. And on the far left side, adding that little pop of brighter color. So that's going to make it look like it's super bright on the left, and it kind of fades to a medium to a dark on the right. So I'm going to kind of repeat the same thing, but with the black next for the shadowing part of the pot. So rinse the brush, squeeze the bristles together. That helps when you're doing these fine little details. Mix about equal parts black and blue. And then on the right side of the pot, basically doing the same thing that I just did, only this is the dark. So those curved kind of strokes, kind of loosely outlining the bottom part of that pot to make it look like the right side of that pot is a little bit more shadowy. So utilizing the black and the white made our pot look a little bit more 3-dimensional. And I'm not going to go back with the darker layer. I'm just going to do that one blue-black layer. And then I'm going to move on to the next pot. I'm going to do the bottom middle pot, and that one was done with Quinacridone Magenta. And I did pretty much kind of the same technique with the highlighting and shadowing. So I will use the white for highlight and black for shadowing. And the first thing I did was outline the shape and then filled it in using the curved strokes going in the curved direction. So it is helpful if you outline the shape first, but you don't have to. So there's my shape, kind of define the shape of that pot, and then I'll fill it in solid using those curved strokes going in the curved direction. And then before this dries, I will do the wet on wet blending with our white. So mix white with Quina on the palette. Did this one more angular and not so much like paying attention to the blending so much. So I did like an angled line on the left, and then I just kind of dragged these lighter colors inwards towards the middle. This pot is partially going to be covered by the string pearl plant, but a lot of this one is going to be showing through. So if you wanted to do some kind of pattern on this after it dries, this would be a good pot to do a pattern on. I did not end up doing a unique pattern for this. Then for the inside part of the pot, you can mix the magenta and black together about equal parts. If you wanted the inside part to be a little bit more magenta, you can add more magenta to it, but actually for this string of pearl, it benefits us for this part to be nice and dark so that our little green plant will have a lot of pretty contrast against that dark color on the inside of the pot. So I'm just outlining it and filling it in solid. And then on this right part, I'll add a little bit of shadow right here by outlining this, kind of drag it in a little bit. Pretty much same technique again that we did with the blue pot. And then I took the titanium white, so a little bit of white on the tip of the brush. It might have been more helpful if I rinsed that black off, but I just kind of loosely outlined right here and back here. A little pop of lighter color on the left, and it just kind of fades out towards the right. Then we'll go on to the next pot. We'll do the upper left white circular pot. And this one, we do need some fresh titanium white that hasn't been touched by other colors. Rinse off that foreground, get all that color off. Squeeze the bristles so they're all gathered together. Load the white right there on the tip of the brush. So we got a generous amount of white on our brush. So this one is super easy. We're just doing solid white, no highlighting, no shading, just solid coat of white. You can outline that shape of the circle, and then I filled it in with strokes going in a circular direction. And then we want to make sure that top part where the opening of this pot is, that top part is flat. We will need to let this dry before painting black stripes on it. So there is our white face, and then I'm going to do the brown wooden ledge that's on our little cord on the left side of the painting. So I'm going to use my T-square for this to make sure that that line, this first initial line, is going parallel. This my brush has brown and white on this. So this is the raw umber. So it's raw umber with a little bit of white. And because raw umber is such a dark color, adding that little bit of white is going to lighten it up slightly. So this part of our ledge is the darkest part. And then the top part of it is lighter. I'm even grabbing some black to kind of darken this some more. Little tiny bit of black on my brush, just doing these kind of lines in the wood that go in the direction of the wood grain, but that black is gently blending with our brown color so that the sides of this board, this wooden piece, that's dark. And then this is the 12 Bright brush. So I found this brush useful for this step. Instead of using the round, you can definitely use the round here, but this one helped me to get those full width strokes to create that wood grain texture. So this part of our wood is lighter. So we want to make sure that when we're loading our brush, we grab a little bit more white this time around. So it's about equal parts white and brown, maybe a teeny tiny bit more white. You just want this to be lighter than the edges of your wood piece. So you're just dragging your paint color across in a horizontal direction and letting the white and brown lightly blend, but leave the streaks there because the streaks of paint that are unblended, that's going to give it that faux wood look. So that is one of the only times I'm using that 12 bright brush. So next, now that we have all the base of the pots done, we're going to start painting some of the cords. And this is raw sienna. I'll also be mixing that with titanium white and using the number 4 round brush. So let's start off with the clean number 4 round brush. And on our palette, let's go ahead and mix our raw sienna and titanium white together about equal parts, although we will be varying the colors in these cords. So it doesn't have to be the right proportion of white to raw sienna. And we can start with this little knot, just painting that half circle shape. And then we can drag our little cord pieces down. So these ones are going to be kind of wavy. And I'm using the raw umber color, so that's going to darken some of these strands of cord. Some are lighter, so some I'm adding a little bit more white to it. So that gives you that variation of color. If your vase, like the blue, if that's still wet, we don't want to paint the pieces that are overlapping just yet. We want to make sure that's completely dry. So I'm going to go ahead and do the knot on this one. This one I added a little bit more brown to, so this one's darker. So I did the little knot and then little straight pieces hanging down. Kind of varied the color in that knot by adding a little bit of white to it. And then we can do the knot down here and then straight pieces. This one we don't have a lot of room down here for much decoration. So those ones just go straight down and off the canvas. And then I'm going to start doing some of the hanging cord pieces that are attached to the pots. So again, utilizing the raw umber, the raw sienna, the white. So these ones I did raw umber and white and just kind of vary that color each time. If you add a little bit of water to that color, that's going to loosen the paint and help you with these straight thin lines for your 4 round brush. If you need to switch to a smaller round brush, you can if it helps you for painting these very thin lines. But I find adding just a bit of water and making sure those bristles are really gathered and making sure you're loading the paint on the tip of the brush, that's really going to help you with the thin lines. So for the pieces that look braided, I did kind of a loose wavy line with the raw umber titanium white combination. And then I did this in 3 layers. For the second layer, I added more white to my brush. It almost looks like pure white at that point. Let's do a little bit more raw sienna in there. But basically, just doing the curvy lines that overlap each other and go opposite directions. It's going to give you that kind of simple braided look with your cord. Again, feel free to change any of these to different styles. And then we have our 2 lines in the back. Of course, I mentioned this earlier. Much of this might be covered by leaves depending on how we end up painting our leaves. But for now, we have an empty pot with our cords. Let me go back over this line. It's a little bit more dark so it stands out better. But we still have that variation in brown, so it's not all solid the same brown. And then I'll go ahead and paint the cords on our middle bottom pot. So this one I used a little bit more of the darker brown, but again, still trying to vary that color. Just loading that paint on the tip of the brush to paint these thin lines. You'll notice that your chalk lines erase as you paint, and that's okay. If you have leftover chalk lines, that is definitely okay. when this painting dries, you'd be able to get a wet wipe and wipe off the rest of the chalk. And it comes off very easily with a baby wipe or a soft, wet paper towel. So I did the braided cord up here using that technique of having wavy lines that go opposite direction. And then I did a line that kind of went down the middle, but varying that color using white and the two browns and maybe even a little bit of black is going to help your brown kind of vary. And then right here, a little pop of white highlight on this cord line. And then we can go and do our next set of cord lines. So for this one, I used a little bit more of the raw sienna color, but still the same technique. The little knot and the little braided piece up here. The cord lines on the lower left piece that has the wood ledge, those one I did with more black. So I did black and the raw umber color, so the cords are darker. But also these ones had to be redone a couple times because we have some overlapping. So these lines are going to be overlapping that vase, but for now we'll just make them so they overlap. But when we paint the vase, we're going to have to paint over the cord line and then redo the cord line, and that's okay. So I did the 3 diagonal lines, the little knot, and this one also has a braided style using the darker colors, the black, the brown, and we can even go back with a lighter color in here. So I had a teeny tiny bit of white, did kind of a straight line that goes through some of the curvy lines. So next we're going to do the patterns on these pots. So assuming the first layer is dry, then we can go in and we can do our stripes and little patterns that we want. Over here I'm doing the black stripes. So this pot has 2 black stripes. This is the 12 bright brush, but it ended up being a little bit too big for this area. So I'm going to go ahead and set that aside and grab my 4 rounds so I can get in there and really control where I want this stripe to be going. So there's going to be 2 stripes. This is just solid Mars black. No highlighting or anything right now that I'm worried about. But the lines are going in a curved direction because our pot is rounded. So there's our first stripe, and then we'll do a second stripe after that. The wood ledge doesn't really have design on it, but we could go in and add more wood grain texture if we want. I'm just taking this black and kind of loosely outlining the edges, especially down here. And then back here, I did like a very loose kind of dashed outline with the black back there. Some of that vase is going to be covering that back part anyway. Those little vertical line and then a horizontal line outlined. The Quinacridone Magenta pot, I just did kind of a blocked area of black down here at the bottom. So just kind of a solid black line down here. But I didn't really add any pattern to this. If you want to add some kind of design to that, you are definitely welcome to do that. I just added a little solid black stripe at the bottom of that pot. For the blue pot, rinse my brush off completely and then titanium white, doing little pin dots and clusters of 3s So this one actually ends up being covered by a lot of leaves. So just keep that in mind as you're doing the patterns. You don't want to do like this intricate pattern that you worked hard on and then your leaves are just going to cover it anyway. That would be kind of disappointing. And then I'm going to do some of the cords that are going to be covering the pot. So they're kind of knotted and holding that pot. So right here, we can do these little knots and then diagonal lines that are kind of tied together. So those two diagonal lines, two dots for the knots, and then it goes up here, makes a little circle, and then down here, diagonal, diagonal, dots for the knots, and then this one goes diagonal up and diagonal up. And we can change this for each of the pots. We can do a different kind of style with these cords and change that color. So right here, I just went back in with a little bit of brown to kind of vary that color. But that golden, when you mix the raw sienna with the white, it makes that really pretty light golden color, and it stands out very nicely against that darker magenta color. For our blue one, I just did a very simple 2 lines going from the center and then up to the sides of that pot. So nothing too intricate, knowing that a lot of these leaves are going to be covering this area anyway. And then our rounded vase, I'm doing something very similar to the magenta vase. So I'll start at the bottom where that middle knot is and did these 2 lines that go kind of diagonal up. But with these lines, they gotta be more curved because it's a rounded pot. So instead of having the lines be straight, I'm having the lines curve. So I did 2 curved lines and then the curved lines going outwards to the side of the pot. And then I'm varying my colors. So I'm using the raw sienna, but also loading my brush in a little bit of titanium white. That's going to vary our color, give it that golden color. And then you can use the darker brown too if you want. So we can bring this up, curved, curved to the top of the pot. This part attaches to that knot. This part curves up to the sides. And then we have 3 knots. We have a knot in the middle top. I'm going to go back over those knots. Knot up here and then a knot right here. And then I can use that darker color to go back wherever it needs to kind of look darker to create contrast to make sure the cord stands out. Next, I'm going to go ahead and paint the turquoise aqua color vase that's on our ledge. And I used bright aqua green for that and the number 4 round brush. So we can go ahead and start by kind of outlining the shape. And this is what I was talking about with the cord earlier. We're going to have to end up painting over that. That's just the easiest way to do it. And then go back and redo the cord. And then, so it's got the curved direction. So we're filling that base in, going in a curved direction. And then before that dries, grab some titanium white. And then, so this is a little bit different than the highlighting technique I did for the other pots. I just did titanium white going in curved direction, just in the center part of the pot. Give that pot a little bit of depth and dimension. And then for the interior part of the pot, that part's supposed to be darker. So I just used that phthalo blue. You could also do it with black, a little bit of phthalo blue without rinsing the brush. Do that center part. And then I just kind of dragged a little bit of phthalo blue down on the left side of that pot. Then I took Mars Black. So rinse brush, add a teeny tiny bit of black right there in the tip of the brush. Kind of outline the left vertical part of the pot and the curved bottom. A little bit of left and right for some shadow. We don't have to get too detailed or too intricate. If you feel confident enough that that's not going to run the paint, I just took the black and redid the cord with hoping that that blue wasn't going to drag into it, and it turned out fine since that blue was still wet below it. So I did that cord again. And next, we're going to move on to painting the plants. So I'm going to do the Pathos plant in the vase on the upper right, the dark blue vase. And so this one, we have Hooker's Green Hue Permanent and Brilliant Yellow Green. And I'll utilize the titanium white also. So this kind of plant, we have a lot of space in the lower left or lower right portion of our painting, so we could really have fun here and have these plants kind of vine down. So a Pathos plant, this plant gets very long. It has these long kind of vines with these really pretty rounded, almost heart-shape style leaves. And in a hanging plant, these would just be kind of hanging down and just kind of growing super long. But we want to still kind of create some variation. So when we're painting these vines, these middle lines, we want to have some long, some might be shorter, and some lighter, some darker. So as I'm reloading my brush, I'm grabbing different amounts of dark green and light green. And so some of these might be overlapping. Some we may not even see the vine, so we can just paint some independent leaves that are inside the vase, not floating leaves. So there's another smaller vine. And then we can kind of add to this later if we want to. But then let's go ahead and start painting these leaves. So this might be a little intimidating because there's so many leaves, but I kind of looked at this as a Zen moment. So once you kind of get the hang of these leaves, you can really just kind of not even think about it. So basically, on these vines, we're just painting very simple leaf shapes, and we want to really vary our green. So not all the leaves are the same amount of green. So some have the dark, some have the light, some are mixing together. So you can go back and forth. You can even grab a little bit of this white and mix green and white together to create kind of a lighter tint of green. Some of these leaves are overlapping. So this one right here, it's almost like I was painting a heart, but the top part of the heart is a little bit more rounded and not going inwards as much. So you can paint them that way. Some of them you will see the stem that's attaching. So you can do a little line and then do your leaf that's attaching to the line. So they're going in all different directions. A little line, curve, curve, and then fill it in solid. And try not to overblend. So I'm really painting these leaves like I do the outward shape and just kind of like 1 or 2 strokes to fill it in. And that's really all you need to get that to be solid. So you're just really going to zen out and paint all these leaves. And really the only rule is to try to vary your color and vary the direction of the leaves. They're all relatively the same size, although you can vary some of them if you want them to be small and big. Some might be a little bit tiny. When you get to the upper part or the inside part of the vase, not all of these leaves have to be attached to the vine piece. So the ones that are hanging definitely do need to be attached to something. But if you're painting them inside the pot, you can just paint singular leaves and we don't really see where they're attached to. On the end of each of your middle stem piece, you want to do a singular leaf right there on the end, and then the other ones can stem out and have their own little piece. If you're finding that your background is a little bit darker than how mine is, or maybe your green's not showing up because the background is too dark. I would utilize more of the titanium white into the green. That's going to help make your green look a little bit more opaque and not so translucent, but still try to vary the color of your green leaves. So right here, this leaf is just kind of a singular leaf. Does not have to be attached to any stem that we can see, or maybe we could see the stem and it just kind of curves down. So definitely paint a bunch of leaves in this opening area of the pot, and it's okay to overlap your leaves over the cords. If we need to go back and repaint the cords so that they're overlapping where they need to be overlapping, that's fine. So with each leaf, it's really like you're painting a bunch of little green hearts. So see the top kind of goes down almost like a heart shape, but it's a little bit more rounded at the top. So right here, I'm adding a little bit more white to my brush so that this next leaf that I create is going to be, see how bright and opaque that gets when you add the white to it? The only problem is if we did all our leaves like that, there wouldn't be a lot of color variation. So imagine the light hitting these leaves differently, and that's why they're showing up different tints of green. So we have some of these leaves, the overlapping our middle stem. Some we can see the stem, some we can't. So lots of different variety in this. So this step does take a while to complete. I am going to go silent for a bit here, but I'm basically just repeating this technique all throughout, filling up all those middle stem pieces and just doing a variety of different greens and different directions with these leaves. Some of those leaves are super narrow, assuming that they're kind of on their side. And then we can even have these pieces branch out further. So I did another vine that was kind of branching out from that larger vine with another leaf. Since there's so much space in that bottom area, it gives us some room to be creative and do that. Then I went back with titanium white and the Hooker's green hue. So just a light, not pure white, but kind of white, much lighter than the actual green. So I'm highlighting some of these leaves, but not all of them. It would be really tedious to highlight all of those and probably too busy, but just a little white kind of curve on the left side of a lot of the leaves, but not all of them. Gives it a little pop of lighter color. We are done with our Pathos plant, and we're going to do the string of pearl next. So this one, super easy. and a lot of fun too. So this one also has hanging pieces, but not as many as the Pathos. So we're going to use, this is still the Hooker's Green. I'm adding a little bit of blue into that green. So adding a teeny bit of Phthalo Blue mixing with the Hooker's Green hue darkens it, but also kind of makes it a different kind of green. It gives it a little bit more variation so that not everything's going to be the same green as our Pathos plant. So I did 4 wavy hanging middle pieces for the string of pearls, and then I'm going to do dots. So this is the brilliant yellow green, but I'm reloading in darker green and even some blue, because all these dots, if they were the same color, it wouldn't really stand out, but because we're changing the color, it does help it to stand out. So using the tip of the brush, I'm just making dots that are attached to our little string. The dots, having the dots be a lot brighter than that middle piece helps create some really pretty contrast too. So on each of those, so I'm not making the dots go all on the line, they're kind of attached. Some are attached to the actual line, some are like on the right side of the line, some are on the left side. They're still all touching that line though. So just doing dots. It also helps to look at a picture of an actual string of pearls plants. You can kind of see the dots can vary too. Some of the dots can be larger, some are smaller. So I did that on each of the waving pieces. And then we want to fill up the interior of our pot too. So, and actually there's a few hanging down behind our pot, but then up here, these ones, we're not going to we're not going to paint the middle line for those. We're just going to paint dots. And I'm using mostly that brilliant yellow green, that bright green, but a few of those with a darker green. So adding that contrast in there helps. But because the interior of that pot is so dark, using that bright color really helps that stand out. It looks very fun and pretty. Just dots all in there. You can vary the dots. Some dots could be larger, some can be smaller. Very pretty plant. I don't own a string of pearls plant, but this painting makes me want to go out and get one because it's so pretty. I do have at least 2 Pathos plants. I don't have any cactus plants or agave plants. And definitely you can change the plants in this if you want to look at different pictures of house plants and do maybe a different kind of succulent. You're welcome to change that as well. We're going to do the agave plant that's in the striped vase. I was thinking this could also be a snake plant just because of the shape of the leaves. So what I did here, what I'm doing on my palette is I'm adding aqua green to whatever green's still on my brush. It's still the Hooker's Green hue and brilliant yellow green, basically all the greens mixed together. But if you add a little bit of that aqua in there, it's going to make it kind of a bluish green, but trying to change that green so that it's still not the same green as all the other plants, gives it a little bit of variety, helps. So with this one, these are narrow pointed leaves that kind of overlap each other. So as you go to reload the brush in different colors, you want to change the color of the green so that each leaf stands out from each other. So I started in the center, and you're just doing kind of an elongated, narrow, pointy leaf. And they start the opening of our vase. We don't really see the opening of this one. They start on that flat line where the edge is. And you're just really, you can use that white to make some of those leaves darker. Don't worry about overlapping our cord lines. We can always go back and repaint the cord lines later. So this one right here. Overlapping that one. And you're just using different amounts of your color to make each leaf a unique, different kind of green. So let's have one kind of going central. Didn't really want to mess up my cord and braid right there. So I made this one kind of go this way. If you want, you can highlight the sides of some of your leaves. That might help get some of them to stand out. So a little bit of white mixed with green, like a lighter color, and just on one side of some of these leaves, like this one, helped those stand out because they were the same color. And then let's do one more kind of darkish leaf. Right here in the center, I ended up covering part of that knot, but that's okay. We can go back and repaint that. So there's our agave style plant. And then we have the little cactus to do next. So the cactus, again, same kind of concept with the greens. This one I made a little bit darker, so used most of the hooker's green hue color. Did not rinse my brush off, so there's still all the other greens on my brush too. So I'm just doing this like barrow shape in the center and then two kind of small barrel shapes on each side. We can shade it a little bit with the black, but because it's such a small area, we really don't have to get super detailed here. And then let's take our titanium white. So I rinsed the brush off, dried it, and I just added white to the tip of my brush. I know the palette's not showing right there, but I am loading it in just the white. And I did little dots on each of the barrel cacti pieces. And then I used magenta and white to create little flowers on the top. So very simple, just kind of drag the brush up in kind of a curved direction using magenta and white to create the little flowers. And our opening of the pot, I went back with black and just kind of redid that bottom part with the darker color. So that kind of stands out because the green and the aqua look very similar to each other, but adding that black right there kind of differentiates the pot from the cactus. I mentioned earlier about our chalk lines, so I went ahead and let my painting dry, and then this is a baby wipe, but if you don't have baby wipes, you can just use like a soft paper towel with very, very little water on it, but it'll erase all the chalk lines and residue, and then the wipe actually takes off the rest of the residue of the chalk so that we don't have any still showing on the canvas. And then really the last thing I'm going to do to this painting are touch-ups. So my cords that should be showing and overlapping some of the plants, I'm just going to go back and kind of repaint where that should be overlapping. So I'm just using my round brush, my raw sienna with my raw umber color and titanium white. So like right here, I'm going to do the cord that's overlapping these agave leaves. And this cord overlapping the cactus. Our Pathos plants, because our leaves are just kind of going everywhere, so it really doesn't matter. We don't have to go back with these cords, but if you want one of these cords to be in front, you can. But in theory, any of those leaves could be overlapping the cord. Another detail I did to this was I added a bit of a highlight on our striped pot in the upper left. So I used titanium white, just a very, very thin layer. So this is kind of tricky because we have that cord right there. So I did that. It just ended up overlapping the cord, but that's fine. Just like a curved line, and then I went back and redid that cord right there. It gives a little bit of highlight in there. And then I decided to add black triangles to the turquoise pot. So this got cut off here a little bit, but all I'm doing is I'm painting black little tiny triangles kind of going and kind of staggered throughout the pot. Gives it an interesting pattern. And this is the conclusion of how to paint hanging potted plants. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.